This is going to be a great episode because we've had an incredible lineup for our third season with tons of great guests who shared their expertise on a wide range of fascinating appraisal topics.
And to celebrate wrapping up season 3, we've handpicked some of our favorite moments from the past season. And we're calling this episode the best of season 3. We've selected 5 clips, and the format for today's episode will be we listen a little bit and then we talk about our clips and give some feedback on our memories together.
Welcome back to Face Value, a podcast by the Appraisal Institute. I'm Warren Boisot, your co-host.
So Warren, it really has been a pleasure co-hosting this podcast with you. I have had some great memories of our time together in person and virtually.
All right, Tonya, first up is one of my favorites for a very easy reason, because we were able to drink wine live. So at 2:00 on a random Tuesday, I was drinking wine and it was my job that day. So I loved it. But our friend Nick Cadigan, an expert in vineyard and winery appraisal, sent us both a couple of wines to try while we discussed the ins and outs of a very specialized area of our field. You two commercial people, show off now. You said you talked to us about that process. Let's dig in. How is it done?
Think like any kind of facility that you might appraise for whatever the product that is the end product of that facility. You kind of have to know a little bit about the operation and what it takes to be a highly functional facility versus one that might be lacking in some regard or another. But essentially, we spend the majority of our time developing relationships with the agents that specialize in this property type. Because when we need to confirm a sale, we need to know a lot of information about that sale. And a lot of times a facility sells, there's the land, there's the real estate, and there's the equipment. There may also be the brand that sells with the property, or there may be inventory that's included in that purchase price. So you really kind of have to drill in on all these factors, and you certainly wouldn't want, an MLS sale price of, $5 million and just think that's just land and real estate. There may be a lot of other elements, personal property, intangibles baked into that you need to sort through.
So are you lending on the business value or the real estate value?
Just the real estate. I don't handle the business value. There are experts that will handle business value, and those are usually the BV guys. There are plenty of wineries that sell without any brand value associated with it. I would say probably more than half are selling with just real estate and land and real estate and equipment. As opposed to brand. A lot of times, wineries that sell, there may not be any brand value. You kind of have to look at historic operating statements to understand if there's any brand that's associated with it, or the sellers aren't willing to part with their brand. They simply want a new facility, or they're going to move to more of a custom crush operation, which maybe lends itself more to a virtual winery where you don't really have your own facility. You can buy bulk wine.
Wait, virtual vineyards? Wait, go back. Tell us a little bit about that. What did you just say? So Warren, which was your favorite wine?
It's always going to be hard for me to not say red.
The red wine was my favorite as well. But we weren't here just to talk about wine or to taste wine. We're here to talk about the valuation of vineyards and like properties. One of the things that Nick talked to us about was how in valuing vineyards, we're kind of stuck between real estate and business value. So let's listen to Nick now tell us a little bit about the valuation of vineyards.
I just think it's so impressive that even as an appraiser, I forget that everything pretty much needs to be appraised. So, again, as an appraiser, I don't even think, wow, a winery needs to be appraised. And here we are, we have somebody in our organization that does it, and we were able to get them on the show. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah. And the winery, to me, appraising the equipment, the business value kind of reminds me of a hotel. So when you think about these different types of like special use properties, there's always something that you've done in the past that you can apply to it. So even though I've never appraised a winery, I've appraised hotels, I've appraised other real estate that has business value and investment value and branding rights. So you can take things you've learned from other assignments and apply them to any new assignment as well. Nick reached out to you to be on this podcast, and it's amazing because he's not in Denver. He's on the West Coast. I'm on the East Coast, and we were able to make this connection and broaden our network. And I think that's one of the things that working as an appraiser is amazing to me.
It was a Friday night and we were texting back and forth about the show. And I think I sent you a picture of a bottle of wine that said Paria on it. So that sparked the idea to maybe have somebody come on about wineries. I texted a friend, Chris Highmore, here at our Colorado chapter, because he's a big agriculture and ranch guy. And he gave me Nick's name. And I think that was a Friday night. I think we taped that episode the following Tuesday. That's how quickly that all came together.
And he shipped us wine to taste.
And by that day, he shipped us wine.
And that brings us up to our next topic is landscaping. We were talking about high-end homes and commercial real estate, and if landscaping around a property has positive benefits on the real estate, and if it increases property value or if it diminishes value depending on the look of the landscaping. And then we found out that you have a familiar relationship with someone who is in the architectural landscape realm.
Yeah, that's right. Kevin joined us and he talked about the explosion in demand for outdoor recreational spaces. This clip that we're going to show really highlights how external events can directly influence the property features and consequently its value.
And before we get there, who's Kevin?
Oh, Kevin, yeah, brother-in-law. Speak to that, Kevin. Do you agree with what Howard said that, COVID kind of changed things and we've seen a different trend since then?
Absolutely. Prior to COVID, we typically would see maybe 10% of our projects that would have like a swimming pool that the client would request to have designed into the project. During COVID, we saw an increase of 7 out of 10 projects that we would meet with the client on the consultation would want a swimming pool or a hot tub. So it really did jump up.
So yeah, that was interesting, Tonya. The pools and hot tubs maybe not so popular anymore. So that was a great one. I loved that episode. I honestly, when we chose our two guests, Kevin and Howard, I was hoping for a little bit of a conflict, but it didn't happen.
That's what I was waiting for. Like, no, how dare you say that? And they were both on the same page. And I was like, no, they wanted to have some rivalry on the architectural and the valuation side.
Okay, Tonya, how about the NARS settlement? This next clip is from our discussion with Darwin Ernst about the NARS settlement, a topic that has been on every appraiser's mind. The changes that took effect in August of 2024 fundamentally alter how we verify transaction details.
Yeah, and Darwin made a very powerful point about how this will force appraisers to do more digging. Let's listen to see what Darwin had to say about the NARS settlement.
I think you're dead on, right? Like we've been supposedly doing this for a long time. The problem is the word verification is not defined in our dictionaries and other places. And some appraisers think that for the verification process means that if you find the same data in two different places, you've verified that it's the same. And unfortunately, I think that falls a little bit short of what our duties are under USPAP when it says collect data, then verify data, and then analyze that data, right? So I think that when it comes to how we look at this particular scenario, we don't know whether that commission or that compensation has been shared equally amongst the buyer's broker and the selling broker. So we need to ask that question as appraisers on each comparable that we're working with. And I know I did this in the past in my market area when I wasn't getting answers back from real estate agents. I started telling people I couldn't use it as a comp because I couldn't verify that the data was accurate. And so they get left out of different appraisal assignments. And then when it comes to the next appraisal assignment, they want to know, well, why didn't you use these particular comps. And I said, well, I couldn't verify the data. If you can't verify the data, I don't know how you're going to use it. You don't know. You have to make an assumption at that point. So I know that's on the extreme side, but it seems like we're going to be the ones that are tasked with making sure that we do the verification process and that we know how much compensation was paid by whom and how did that potentially impact the sale of that particular property.
So there was 3 things that he mentioned: gather data, verify data, and analyze. Right? Those were the 3 things that he was talking about. And the important one here with the NAR settlement is we have to verify information and report on it. And if we cannot verify the information, how do we report? So I know this affects mainly residential work. So can you tell us, Warren, if this has impacted anything and if we've seen any changes brought out to the industry based on what happened earlier this last year?
Yeah, we are about a year out of when this took place in August of 2024, and I will say that I kind of bought into the hype a little bit that it was going to be a big deal and it was going to change everything. And I'm here to report that at least in my market, it has not. It just like many other things fizzles out and it just wasn't that big a deal because here's what I'm finding. Although I'm listening to Darwin and definitely making sure that I reach out to these agents and get the details of the transaction, it's pretty much business as usual. Rarely, if ever, I'm told, oh yeah, this was an extraordinary commission that was paid that for whatever reason. It just rarely happens, as rare as it used to happen. But what I'll generally hear from the agents is that, nope, it was business as usual. This side got this side got this. But at least, like Darwin says, I did verify. And that's, I think, the important thing here.
Now, you brought us a really good speaker for episode 8, which was about stigmatized properties. And I had a lot of fun with that episode. Rob Stylo, and he shared his experience with us regarding the Chris Watts house, a property that had some dark history. So thank you, Warren, for bringing him on our show.
Yeah, Rob's another good example of how face value works. I think I texted him one day with the idea, and I believe the next week he was on a taping of the show. So it happens quickly. But yeah, his analysis of how such a significant stigma impacts market value over time was eye-opening. It was a stark reminder of the unique challenges we can face in this profession.
Yeah, not all stigma is haunted house, so to say. There is positives with stigma. Again, if it psychologically affects you, it is considered stigmatized.
So since I'm ready for Halloween, can you tell us about the negative stigma for now? Do you want to go into the Watts house for us and let us know how the events that happened in that house, how did that affect value?
Sure. So I first did the Watts house right after the tragic events. And through my research using past stigmatized houses plus some publication, I gave a market range of values percent wise. The first 1 to 2 years, it would be an unsellable property. And then you'd gain 15 to 20% back each year after that. The Watts house, the crime was so heinous that it made national news, which just narrowed down to the small town there. So it just made the property pretty much unsellable for the first couple years.
Wow. Tony, I don't know about you, but as an ambassador for our podcast, if I ever have somebody that says, oh, I want to take a listen, this is the one that I turn them on to because I think it was so interesting and fascinating. And I probably watched it myself 4 or 5 times over because it was just fascinating.
Do you know what I found interesting is how Rob does not talk about, he doesn't mention the words murder or anything graphic. He's like the tragic events. And I was like, oh, it sounds like, maybe there was a landslide and something happened. But then when you look into it, you're like, is the property haunted? Or is there something we should know about? Why are people not going there? Is think about those neighborhoods of small towns where there's always some kind of ghost sighting. But what interested me more was that all of these tragic events occurred in Colorado.
It was also interesting, if you remember, he talked about the other side of stigmatized property, the positive. If you remember, he was the appraiser for a TV show, like an HGTV type TV show. I remember he couldn't tell us the name of it, but it was there kind of locally in his market, where I think he had like 4 houses that had been either different floor plans or different types of finishes that the people had a certain amount to spend. And then he went in as an expert to value them. And it kind of proved that, hey, this floor plan actually the market sees as more valuable than this. And I thought that was interesting. So stigma can go both ways.
I think it's just because things don't happen as often. So when I look at the news in New York City, there's constantly a stabbing, a shooting, a car jumped the curb and ran somebody over. So it just happens so much. I think we're desensitized. Whereas
Totally.
when it happens in a small town, it's like a huge event.
Okay. So another cool episode that we had, Tonya, if you remember, was we talked about how the Appraisal Institute is full of members that are it's nepotism, it's multi-generational, and we had a lighthearted, nostalgic moment from our conversation with Ryan, a multi-generational appraiser himself, and a wonderful reminder of how many of us were introduced to this profession.
Yeah, and I think Ryan Lubb is someone who is known by the National Appraisal Network. He has a lot of experience with ADQC, bringing appraisers in. He was very vocal on getting the life membership for appraisers, that coming into the forefront, and for us to learn more about who life members are, and trying to bring appraisers together. He's also helped out with reducing, barriers to entry in our profession. So Ryan is a third generation appraiser, I believe, right?
I think so.
And he's a friend of mine. I think he's a friend of yours as well. And I love this clip because he talks about his father and what he did when he was a child, going with him to national conferences. So let's listen in.
Anything you guys remember specifically that was kind of your job as a kid?
Running to Snap Photo to get the pictures was always the first thing we did. Yeah. Putting the subject tabs, you take it out of the little folder and you place it on the picture, and little things like that.
My favorite thing was taking the rub ons and scratching them onto the report or the map or photo so you can identify those characteristics. Even the form reports at the time, you would still have to paste double side or rubber cement them to the page. And that was just a fun little task, actually contributing and helping.
Warren, do you want to know why this is one of my favorite episodes?
Please tell me.
So I've been taking my kids out with me since they were in car seats when they couldn't speak.
Nice.
And they always drove around with me, seeing all the sites that I was appraising. And now, I pretty much stay in the office more than I go out as much as I used to. But they come with me to our meetings. And my son especially, he fell in love with just listening to the data and analysis. And he is now saying, Mommy, I'm a good math person like you. And my daughter's like, no, I'm better. So it's like they see me on Excel spreadsheets, and they see how we use things that they're learning on a day-to-day basis in our profession. And they're like, oh, I can do that. So they have fun coming to the office and on the field when I get to go out. And I see Ryan and his dad's relationship, and I'm hoping that maybe one day I can bring my kids in on this.
That is awesome. And before we played the clip, I forgot that I didn't know Ryan before this episode, but my friend JP Nisley was actually in this clip as well. And he and his dad, Jack, who are also an appraiser, obviously, it was great to have him on the podcast because he is a great member of the Appraisal Institute, no bigger ambassador for this organization.
And then what we also found was every time we talk to appraisers, it's either they're like Warren and myself, who just came into the profession, hey, I'm going to try this. And we've been doing it ever since for 20 plus or, 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
2 years or 20 plus years. But then there's a lot more that tell us that they were brought in by their families. I think we had Emily Brauman. She was also multi-generational, who came to us about a women's initiative.
Yep.
And we were talking to her about her Ascend appraisal network that she put together that are women, but she was also multi-generational. She's bringing her daughter who may not be doing appraisal, but she's doing the marketing for her Ascend network. So it's interesting how we work with our families, and it's a profession that you can do from home. You can go to the office, and it just adapts to anyone's lifestyle. It's just amazing.
Okay, so before we wrap up, Tonya, like I said, I wanted to treat this as an award show. I'm going to force you to choose your favorite episode and maybe just tell us why. But you've got to open the envelope right now. And what's your favorite?
So I have to say, when I receive things for free, it's always the best. So the wine tasting episode, I'm sorry, the vineyard and winery appraisal episode was the best.
I could see why you would choose that one. I think that although I agree with you, I'm going to go with the stigmatized property. Just simply, again, it was so interesting. And anytime I tell people about the podcast, that is the episode that I tell them to go watch, because I know that I don't care if you're interested in real estate appraisal or not. That's going to be a episode somebody's going to watch from start to finish.
Yeah. And watch or listen, because remember,
Watch or
sometimes
listen.
you're listening. Yeah, you're listening to us in the car. That's where I do my podcast listening, or walking around, Manhattan trying to find a train to hop onto. But the stigmatized was amazing because it was different.
Yep.
The landscaping, I think, was great because you're looking at it from a different viewpoint where everything is, glitz and glamour. So everything has its own little positive. And I think everyone should listen to all of our episodes, to be honest with you, because we're that great, right, Warren?
100%. 100%. That is a wrap on the best of season 3 episode. And a huge thanks to all of our listeners and guests this season. And thank you all for tuning in.
We hope you enjoyed the season with us. We've had a great time hosting these episodes, bringing on these guests, and we are excited for season 4. So please, to our listeners or our guests, if they have any other topics that they want to bring on, send us an email at facevalue@appraisalinstitute.org. We look forward to reading all of your emails, seeing your input, getting new suggestions, and having you on our show.